Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another Bulletproof for BJJ podcast. I am JT.
I'm Joey. How are you guys?
Welcome. And today we will be discussing cross-training for BJJ. Now, what we're talking about here, guys, is not training at other gyms. We're talking about exercise and workouts that you do around jiu-jitsu to try and help you get better for jiu-jitsu. It's a really common thing. People will say, oh man, I'm doing triathlon for get me fit for jits, or any number of other things. Insert appropriate training type there. You would have encountered this a little bit, Joe, yourself.
Yeah, heaps. We spoke about it a few episodes ago with the running piece, didn't we?
We did. Yep.
People ask all the time.
Definitely.
Oh man, I'm really getting into my powerlifting at the moment. You know, squat, bench, deadlift. It feels really good for my jits, or yoga. I hear yoga's really good for Joe Rogan's always talking about fucking yoga.
Yeah.
And so for us, I guess there's good and bad parts to all of these.
Pros and cons, right?
Yeah, and that's what we want to discuss, isn't it?
And we want to stay reasonably objective here. The idea of this is not a takedown piece, because like both you and I, Joe, have done CrossFit workouts.
Yep.
And gone there.
I was on that CrossFit nutsack for quite a while.
Going hard.
Yeah, Greg Glassman is the shit.
But
we also like powerlifting.
I love powerlifting.
Love your heavy barbell stuff.
Mate, that's a default for me. I think I'll retire to powerlifting. When I'm less dynamic, when I'm 70, I just, if you're going to be stiff and immobile, might
as well be strong.
Yeah, that's right. And then look, yoga too. Like there's a lot of value in it, but let's break it down today, because I think this is a thing for people out there who maybe haven't had as much experience doing any of those things, but see it and it looks appealing. It's like, oh, but my mate does it and I can't always get to jits. Like maybe this is a good substitute, right? Let's break down the pros and cons. And I think a good place to start is CrossFit, because it is a very challenging thing and it's a very multi-layered thing that I guess people don't always understand.
Yeah, and you look at CrossFitters, you watch CrossFit games, you look at anyone.
Those guys are jacked.
Yeah, they're fucking jacked.
Those chicks
man, they're super strong.
Amazing.
In terms of physical attributes, they have a lot going on. And
amazing,
it's undeniable.
Yes.
Look, I really when I got into CrossFit, it was back when was I was a blue belt.
Yep.
And I had a lot more time on my hands, and it was at the early days of CrossFit. So yes. I remember it was with a mate who would go on to open a CrossFit gym in Sydney, but it was before that, and he was talking about this website with these workouts, and he had a ute, and he'd just throw all this gear in the ute, and we'd go to the park, and we'd just do these gut-wrenching, horrendous workouts.
Yeah.
Personally, worked really well for me for a period of time.
Yeah.
I think I trained with him 2 or 3 days a week, and I was also doing calisthenics at the time and rolling jiu-jitsu. But ultimately, I found that the CrossFit stuff I was doing was just so demanding that it was wrecking me for my jiu-jitsu training.
Understood.
So I had soreness. To be honest, I didn't really feel the fatigue because I was like 24 or 25.
Just going for it.
Yeah, I think at that age you can just kind of do whatever, and your body makes the best of it. You don't notice if you're tired.
Yes.
You don't get tired.
No, it's hard to get tired.
But I was like, holy fucking shit. Like I'm turning up to jiu-jitsu. I'm like, I got no power because I did 500 ring dips yesterday, or I did 200 chin-ups.
Yes.
I can't fucking grip the gi, things like that. So I noticed that, the CrossFit thing in and of itself, and this was unique to my experience at that place. Mm-hmm. It's not to say that all CrossFit training is at that intensity, but it was taking away from my ability to train jiu-jitsu effectively.
Sure. And maybe we can step a few steps back first. For those of you who have heard of CrossFit but aren't necessarily familiar, maybe we can talk about a few of the component parts as to why, I guess we can credit CrossFit for repopularizing Olympic lifting.
Yep.
Right? Because that was just something you didn't do.
That's right.
It's just like an old Ukrainian guy in a garage somewhere.
Yeah, if you're an Olympian, you do it. Otherwise, don't do it.
Don't do it, right?
Yeah.
And same thing with people doing rings. Like
rings training,
gymnastics.
It gave, whether or not they do it well, to whatever, we could talk about that. But they brought back this gymnastics thing. The CrossFit model, for folks who are not so familiar with it, is the combination of weightlifting, gymnastics, and what like monostructural cardio work.
Yeah.
So running, ski, erg, bike, whatever.
So when we say
Burpees.
erg, we mean like rowing machine. For those of you not familiar, the ergo, you can do, there's a ski erg, which is like a vertical one. You may see that in various clips. And then a normal erg is just a rowing machine.
But so these CrossFit workouts, what they did was they made fitness fun in the sense that they jumbled up these different disciplines, and they really put a lot of emphasis on the actual workouts themselves.
Yep.
Not the program over, say, a longer period. So not the mesocycle or the macro cycle, but they look at the workouts. So they're like, oh, we're going to do, 10, 12, 14, 16, 20 reps of these 3 exercises. Or we're going to do, like they have these fun formats.
Yes. And competitive as well, right? They bring out that competitiveness.
Exactly. It's like do it as fast as you can or do as much work as you can.
Sure.
And that's why you get fucking fit from doing it. It extracts the best performance from you.
Definitely.
In any case, there is a lot to credit CrossFit for.
Definitely.
Especially for us from looking at it from a fitness perspective and a small gym perspective rather than, say, a jiu-jitsu perspective.
Sure. But we are both people who seek adversity. We like hard stuff.
Yeah.
So we go, it sounds like death. Count me in. Whereas for the best part, most people coming to just, they're pretty, I guess, inexperienced. And they're like, yeah, but I just want to do something. That might bite people kind of hard. And I think there can be a bit of a culture shock. If you're not somebody who's spent a long time in gyms and then you're like, oh, CrossFit sounds hot, I'm going to get amongst it. Like, I want to look like that guy or that girl. Amazing. And then it's just savage. Something like, is it Murph?
Yeah.
That's like one of the most famous, terrible workouts.
One of the, what do they call them? The hero workouts.
The hero workouts is named after a fallen soldier because it was originally started by a bunch of kind of ex-army crew who like to do hardcore workouts. And I'll just let you know, like you can Google it. Like it gets done, usually it gets done annually as a tribute to that person. But then also if you just want to suffer, there are some famous workouts. And I've done that workout once or twice. But all I wanted to say is I found it inspiring looking at people who are CrossFitters. But then also just considering this, there's a bunch of upsides because you can get really fit really quick. But what I want to say around that is there's also a lot of costs around that too. Like CrossFit is its own sport. It's freaking hard. If you're spending any extra time doing anything else, you're gonna struggle. Like and you can speak to this, Joe. CrossFit itself, if you're doing CrossFit 3 days a week or more, that's gonna take you up right there.
There's no room for anything else.
No.
Yeah, and I think that is really underpinning this whole conversation is that all of the different sports or disciplines we're going to discuss are their own sport or discipline.
Yes.
And everybody listening to this already has a sport/discipline, which is jiu-jitsu.
That's right.
So the problem is what comes along with a discipline is a culture.
Yes.
And that culture assumes that you are only doing that discipline.
Yep.
You are a CrossFitter. You are a jiu-jitsu fighter. And it's why when you go to your jiu-jitsu academy, your coach is like, no, man, don't do CrossFit. Come and train jiu-jitsu 6 days a week, 2 a day.
Yeah.
Right? Because they are so they're so embedded in the culture, and they want you to embed yourself in the culture. So that's really the problem is that like there are really good aspects to CrossFit.
Yeah.
But if you get into something like that, it is something that is ultimately trying to take you and mold you into like a disciple.
Yes.
And that it's very hard. I mean, we see this in MMA, right?
Yeah.
Where you have, and we see this more so in the past with MMA, but you have like the fighter who has a wrestling coach and a boxing coach and a jiu-jitsu coach. And those coaches don't communicate with each other. And so the jiu-jitsu coach is trying to turn them into a black belt in the gi.
Yep.
And the wrestling coach is trying to make them an Olympic caliber wrestler.
Yep.
And it's like, you can't fucking do all those things at the same time.
No.
So then you get someone that's like, hang on. There's good things in wrestling, but there's stuff in there that's not relevant to MMA. Yes. So let's fuck all that off.
Yep.
There's good stuff in jiu-jitsu. Let's take that. Let's get rid of the rest. And then you have this strategist and then it comes together.
Yeah. I guess that the evolution of MMA is that you must be cross-disciplinary.
Yes.
And we could look at CrossFit and say, it's like the MMA of fitness.
It really is,
right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
it's so many things. Like because Olympic lifting itself is its own art. Like there's people out there who just do Olympic lifting for 20 years and they're still not the best in the world.
That's right.
It's far more technical than it appears. You know, and I've done a bit of Olympic lifting. I did 6 months dedicated of Olympic, and I couldn't believe that at the end of 6 months I wasn't significantly better.
Right, yeah.
Like I was only like 5% better in 6 months. I was like, it's so frustrating. But that's because it's technical. And in the same way, gymnastics, we all watch Olympics at the gymnastics at the Olympics. We're like, dang, this is hard as hell. Like, wow, It's so impressive. So I think if we can break CrossFit down into its component parts and say it is very technical, like people who are very technical, like a Matt Fraser, like someone who's an amazing Olympic lifter.
He's like multiple-time CrossFit champion.
Considered one of the GOATs of the CrossFit Games.
He's the GSP of CrossFit.
Yeah, you could say that. I mean, how many times? 4 times?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, long story short, guys, for you out there, understand that you're getting into something very technical.
Yeah, and it is something that's going to have a lot of benefits for you, but it's also going to have a lot of drawbacks.
And this is something I just want to underpin, which is something which is inherently, and this is not a dig, this is an observation that you guys need to know. CrossFit also has a pour harder element, right? And that speaks to jiu-jitsu people. You just go as hard as you can. And that's actually not the best way to improve your athleticism. That's actually a proven way to get yourself an injury. And what studies have shown in like HIIT training, high intensity training, anaerobic style training, they are only beneficial up until about 12 weeks of that cycle. So if you're like, right, I'm going to work on my anaerobic threshold, just go as hard as I can on the row and in different ways and means, etc., that is only going to help you up until doing it for 12 weeks. And then you plateau. And you actually need to switch off that. But CrossFit's whole model is, no, you just go hard every time, keep going harder, continually forever.
Yeah.
And that is not periodized. And that is why people do hit a threshold of being mega fit, and then within about 6 months more, you can start to get some niggles and you just try and push through.
Start to crash and burn.
Yeah, and then there's a problem.
I think there's a lot of parallels between CrossFit and Jiu-Jitsu.
Yep.
And they are if you look at CrossFit on paper, and I've always said this, I have a naturally good mobility and good body awareness, and you do too.
Yep, love it.
So, if you're lucky enough to have those things, then you can go to a CrossFit class and have a really great workout. Yeah. Because you're doing all these compound movements, squatting, pressing, pulling, running, it's great. You have a machine that works quite well, and so you apply this stimulus, which is the workout, and the machine, can whatever, have a great wrap around the track. The problem is that most people don't have naturally good body mechanics, good body awareness. And this is something we're always talking about with jiu-jitsu. Standard jiu-jitsu player doesn't have great body awareness, is tight, is coming in from a day spent sitting in an office chair, is, really like needs strength and needs mobility, right? But the nature of jiu-jitsu is it doesn't discriminate. So it just lets you go for it. Yeah. And the beauty is you can form a game around that. But the beast is that you're probably going to get injured because of those deficiencies. Yeah. CrossFit is exactly the same. You see all these people pressing overhead, doing burpees, doing push-ups, like good exercises, right? But they have mobility deficiencies. They have weakness. They have postural inefficiencies. All of these little things mean, well, actually, you shouldn't be wrapping your car around the racetrack. You should be focusing on the mechanics. Now, caveat, there's plenty of good CrossFit gyms that focus on that.
They work on that,
Yeah, and it's also to say, like with jiu-jitsu, we're not saying don't roll until you fix all that shit. It's like, no, like roll, participate in the pohara.
Put it together.
But also work on that shit, right? Yeah. So this is the problem, is that like if your machine is not operating well and you apply that kind of work to it.
You put it under big stress, big speed, more likely to have an accident.
Exactly. And maybe you get away with it for a few years in your 20s and early 30s, but the point comes where you get fucked up and then you're probably going to blame something else. And it's like, no, you were just doing the wrong thing.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, yeah, it's the classic, I slept wrong. No.
Yeah.
Your pillow didn't do that to you.
Yeah. But I think there's a real privilege in that. If you do move well and have the athleticism, great, you can apply something like CrossFit. And if you're smart about how you manage your recovery and whatnot, sure, it could fit in with the person who's training jiu-jitsu as well.
Yes.
But for the majority of you out there, I see it. It's not the perfect solution.
Yeah, and it just, the cost, it is an expensive thing physically because there's all these related costs you don't know about. So just I'll digress slightly. Just one of our guys, Connor, he's gotten a lot fitter and stronger through lockdown, which has been great. And now he's like, oh man, I'm going to do a half Ironman.
Oh shit!
I was like, what? Really? I think his partner is keen to do it, and so he's like, yeah, I'll get in on that. And I was like, dude, do you know how much mobility you're going to have to do because of that? Like, he's already a bit stiff. That's going to tighten you up so much.
Running, swimming, biking?
Running, swimming, biking. Like a lot. Not just a triathlon, like a half Ironman. It's like he's just jumping off the deep end on this one. I said, dude, like, there is a cost for that. And that's what I guess we're trying to communicate about many of these things. There's a lot of value and there's so many good upper end aspects. But the thing that I think we want to get across here is that, like, know what you're paying for. It's like, you know, when you buy that dodgy kind of secondhand car, you're like, oh yeah, it'll get me so far. Then you got to replace the clutch and then replace this and replace that. So even though it only costs you like a couple of grand, it will cost you an extra 15 in repairs. And we really don't want you to get booby trapped thinking, oh, it looks really good on the surface. And then once you get into the nuts and bolts, it costs you a lot more than you expect.
Yeah.
So
and I got like a black and white kind of, if you are working full time,
yes,
and you're anything older than like your late 20s,
yep,
and you can only train a few times a week, do not fuck with CrossFit. Like if you're training jiu-jitsu, like it doesn't fit. It will not work.
Okay,
someone prove me wrong.
Okay, cool. Joey's thrown it out there. Challenge issued.
The other thing too is that culturally, jiu-jitsu and CrossFit have very similar, like the community aspect's quite cool.
Great community, yeah.
And I do see there's a lot of crossover and people get, oh man, I love it. Started doing it. Like I know a lot of CrossFitters are like, man, I started doing a few jiu-jitsu sessions. Fucking love it, man. It's so cool. And you're like, man, that's awesome. Yeah. And then like 6 months later you see them and they're either like fully bitten down on jiu-jitsu and fucked off their CrossFit membership. or they're like, nah, I got too many injuries. I've just stuck with the CrossFit.
Yeah. It is interesting. But I'm going to move now to a subject which I do love and am low-key obsessed with, which is powerlifting. Because I love all things strength, and powerlifting is a very simplified version, in my opinion. Don't get me wrong, all moves within powerlifting, which is a back squat, a barbell back squat, a deadlift through different, like a conventional deadlift or a sumo deadlift, depending on what people do, pick that bar off the ground, and a bench press.
Three exercises.
Pretty simple.
Simple, not easy, but simple.
Simple. Like you don't have to think too much. Like, and because it's about ultimately performing one rep at your maximum effort, there's something very simple in that. Like, beautiful in the fact that it's just yes or no.
Yeah.
You either pick that bar up and the judges give you 3 white lights, or you didn't pick it up well enough, or you put it down. So that's the thing. I like it because the way it's appealed to me is when I first started training in the gym when I was like 12 years old, I didn't know what I was doing. I was just looking at books and magazines. I basically did bodybuilding workouts. I didn't know anything about strengths. I was just doing heaps of high volume, heaps of reps, bodybuilding. And then later...
What's the difference, just simply put, for people who aren't sure, like between strength and bodybuilding?
So the idea with bodybuilding, and it's the popularity of bodybuilding came from way back in the day because they used to do feats of strength. Strong men used to kind of lift big weights and stuff like that. But what they realized, they used to get them in at World's Fair. So George Hackenschmidt is like one of the Germans, one of the most famous strongmen of all time, popularized certain lifts. They realized that people weren't as impressed with his lifting as just his body. Like he looked built. He looked strong. People were like, oh, dang, it's kind of hot. Because back in 1926, people weren't that, I
want to breed with that.
Yeah, that's some good genetics. So that's the thing. This really spawned this idea of just building muscle. So typically, and guys, don't get upset if you're a bodybuilder. I'm oversimplifying here.
I'll be okay.
Yeah, stay calm. Here's the deal. There's more isolation work and higher repetition work to just build size throughout all the muscles of the body, going for an aesthetic look, symmetry, all these different things, simply for the look.
Right.
So there's some people out there who do that using lighter weights.
Yeah.
And then there's plenty of bodybuilders out there who are bloody strong.
Sure.
Who've done it through much heavier weights. But what we're looking at with powerlifting is much less reps, much heavier. And it's trying to achieve a maximum lift across these three movements.
So heavier loads, lower reps versus bodybuilding, which is higher reps, slightly lighter loads, more moderate loads.
Yes, correct.
Right on.
And yeah, you can get really strong. Like actually, I think recently someone posted, I think it was not Bernardo, if one of Bernardo's guys, one of his instructors said, my white belt's stronger than yours. And the guy's he's like an American champion powerlifter. And he just picks him up by the feet and just spins him around like he's nothing.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, when you look at powerlifters, they don't look fit. You know, it's a static.
Yeah, it's usually a bit swollen,
bit of a
puffy.
belly.
Yeah,
but they're so strong.
Yeah,
you know, they are some of the strongest people in the world.
The exception to that is a lot of female powerlifters. You do see a lot.
Jacked,
but often like lean, right?
Yeah, leaner.
Yeah, leaner than the dudes.
Yeah, definitely. The benefits are you do get very strong at those things, and your baseline strength is through the roof, and that's great. If you never did anything else and you learned to do powerlifting, it would make you a strong human. But in that, because of these chosen lifts, the squat, the bench, the deadlift, it also makes you quite stiff, and stiff in a very linear way. It's bilateral. So when we talk about bilateral, guys, there's like 2 feet on the ground, evenly spaced, whatever that looks like. 2 hands on the bar at equidistant.
Symmetrical.
Yeah, it's got to be very balanced to generate all this force. But life isn't like that. And jiu-jitsu is definitely not like that.
Definitely not. Yeah, the powerlifting thing, like, we love squatting, we love deadlifting, pressing, like there's merit to all of those lifts.
Yes.
But again, it's like, well, there is a trade-off when you start to specialize in those things. So if you look at what we push, it's like, get strong at those lifts to an extent, but also do this other stuff that's going to help you build strength in other ranges of motion and start to build mobility at the same time.
Yes.
The issue there is that just drilling down really hard into those 3 simple movement patterns is that you ingrain those patterns into your body at the expense of the others, don't you?
Yeah.
And it's like, sure, like you might be a real handful on the mats because you can just pick people up and fucking throw them, or like, you're really, really powerful in certain positions, but you're not going to have like this dexterity and this agility and this mobility that gives you movement options, right? You could be a big, strong human, but you're not going to be like, I'm not going to say Marcelo Garcia because that's, but we want to be able to move.
Yeah. And no, I think there's a point of diminishing return. So strength and stiffness, like functional stiffness, your connective tissues, your muscles, tighten up in a certain way to protect your skeleton. Your body's trying to protect itself, and you're conditioning it to be stiff on purpose. But there's a point at which you start being stiffer than being strong. Like it's not directly correlated, because you can also be super stiff and not be strong at all.
Yeah.
We've seen that. The problem is this, guys, you do develop a certain posture, like a bench posture and like a slight tightness in the hips posture. And really, it's just about loading you up. You don't have to move far within powerlifting. It's just bar pass, keeping it straight as you can and producing as much force as you can. The problem with this is if someone bends your arm into external rotation and you don't take your arm there, you're tapping to that Kimura really quick. If somebody like leg trips you and puts your foot off balance and you fall and you're not used to stabilizing like that, you might fall really badly. And because your hips don't move well, when your hip doesn't move, you take the pressure at your knee, and then maybe you're tearing a ligament in your knee. And there's all these things that, even though, yes, max strength, you could be one of the strongest people ever, does that mean your jiu-jitsu will get better? Possibly not, because it actually will hold you back from doing some fun stuff, which we enjoy in jiu-jitsu. Whether you play guard or you play on top, we do need to be great movers. And that's really what we're aiming for. And that's why powerlifting at its, even if you do it recreationally, can hold your jiu-jitsu back potentially.
Yeah. The other thing too, and we've seen this with a lot of people who are really, experienced powerlifters, is that because they have so much tension and so much muscle and density through those positions, it's really fucking hard
Yeah.
to unwind any of that, isn't it? It's really hard to like get them to a place where they can do a Cossack squat or, you know, and of course there are exceptions out there. But the further you go down that path, the harder it is to come back.
Definitely. Well, so looking at that, guys, we can definitely appreciate any of these things. And I guess it depends on where you're coming to this question at. Like when I do jiu-jitsu, but I just want to get strong. Or I do jiu-jitsu and I'm really stiff. I need to loosen my body up. And that leads us to our next point, which is yoga.
Yoga.
Classic. It's always the way, you know, speaking with somebody, yeah, man, I've just started doing yoga for jiu-jitsu. All right, that's cool. Like it's a good idea. It's like in theory, it's like, yeah, I'm going to loosen my body up because I feel too stiff and tight. Okay, it's good for you to recognize that and go, yeah, I want to do yoga. And back in the day, I would say 2008, around that time, I was dating someone who was a yoga instructor.
How dare you?
Yeah, my God. Which meant I spent a lot of time doing yoga. Actually, I did a lot of time leading in, just doing my homework, putting in the time. Hey.
Yeah. I come here all the time.
Yeah, sweating all the time. That early morning postnatal class is tough. But yeah, and I'm somebody who has put a lot of time and energy into doing flexibility training. And what I actually realized was there is a huge strength component to yoga, which I probably didn't appreciate before I started doing it.
Yeah.
But when you start holding certain poses longer, like a long kind of warrior lunge.
Fucking excruciating.
I'm putting it out there, if you haven't done a 30-day yoga challenge, you don't know what I'm freaking talking about. It'll get you.
But even if you've done a yoga class, like one really good class,
Yeah.
you're like, man, this is pushing me to my limits.
It's hard.
Yeah, and obviously there's many different types of yoga.
Of course.
So we're kind of talking middle of the road
Speaking
here.
very general. So like,
Yeah.
you know, like people will go, oh, I'm doing like yin flow or, you know, like there's all different branding within yoga, whether it be hatha, iyengar, ashtanga, like don't worry too much. They are quite different in terms of some are stronger, like they make you hold a pose for 3 minutes or something, which is insane. Like I went to a very casual iyengar class and it was one of the I'm like, I have to, how long am I here? I'm whispering to my girlfriend.
Is there a timer on the wall?
Because like I was trying to flex, like I was getting real low.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I'm killing these suckers. These 40-year-old women got nothing on me. And then we had to stay there for almost 2.5 minutes and I almost tore my adductor muscle. I was just like, I stay holding, just trembling like flies. So that's what I wanted to say. The thing that I had learned over time is that the strength component to yoga is underestimated.
Yeah, there's a misconception that it's just about flexibility.
That's
isn't
right.
it? Yeah.
And also, it tightened me up. I actually got quite tight. I got quite tight to the front of my shoulders. Like when you're doing that kind of down dog, rocking back,
Cobra
holding.
shizzle.
Yeah, you're there a lot. You're spending a lot of time under tension. And if you're someone who's got bad shoulders or you know impingement in your shoulders, that can present some problems as well.
Yeah. I think you know, like we got to acknowledge yoga for BJJ, right?
Of course.
You know,
Shout out Sebastian Broche.
Yeah, there's a huge platform out there that peddles yoga for jiu-jitsu people, and you know, it seems that they do a lot of great stuff. What my experience with yoga is very similar to yours. Some really good things in there. Very surprised at how fucking hard it is, right? And you know, those long holds, man, there's so much carryover to jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Like someone stacked you and like they're holding you there for like 2 minutes and you're refusing to let them pass.
Yeah.
That's your hold.
That's appropriate. Yeah.
You know, or like someone's got you in their X guard and you're defending it and you just fucking spread out and you just refuse to be swept. It's like there's huge carryover there. What again, you know, to raise that point of like the discipline aspect of it, like the fact that it's its own system of practice.
Yes.
I always found that there is really good stuff in yoga, but there's a lot of fluff that I don't need.
Yeah.
You know, in the way of like I have found personally that some of the cueing of how they do exercises is just incorrect.
Yes.
In terms of, and this is getting into the reads, but in terms of like scapular positioning, like where you want your shoulders when you're doing certain pressing exercises, back bends, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of like mysticism, and I know yoga practitioners who are very much support this as well, where it's like, no, there's some mystical bullshit that a lot of practitioners say, like that is just wrong. That stuff I have an issue with, because obviously we're into teaching people how to exercise properly. But also like the whole idea of like the spiritual aspect of it for me.
Sure.
I'm like, I see real value in some of the physical attributes here, and I'm enjoying the breathing and I like the mindfulness. But some of the shit that's coming out of the teacher's mouth right now, it just means nothing to me.
Yeah,
It is just fluff.
Yeah.
And again, it's kind of like you're in that culture, and it's like they've got their whole own.
There's a dogma around.
Yeah, and they've got their own like nomenclature, like special words they use, and they like to use like Sanskrit, and you're like, I don't even know what that fucking word means. Chaturanga Vasana. You're like, what the fuck? Can't you just talk to me in English? Yeah. Like, you know, so for me, I've always found a lot of that stuff kind of detracts from it.
Oh yeah.
But there's good stuff there.
Definitely. I think that's where you could bring in like a Roy and HG commentary.
Yes.
As a Tootsie Roll, bit of Twinkle Toes.
Yeah, the battered salve.
The battered salve. For those of you out there who have no idea who Roy and HG are, they are legendary Australian comedians and sports commentators.
Yeah, the best.
So if you didn't want to listen to the commentating on a sports event like the grand final or the Olympics, they actually gave their own alternate
commentary,
Aussie commentators, and they're great for that because they know sport very well.
But yeah, like two glaring sort of deficiencies for me with yoga, and that you touched on, Reed, was the constant pressing action, because it's all based on a mat. So you got your hands down the mat and you're pressing. So it's like a push up. And you're going through different positions, but it's this hardcore pushing either in front of you or overhead.
All the time.
And you're on the wrists. And if you don't have great wrist mobility, and if you've got shoulders that are a little bit out of balance, that causes problems, because you kind of need to be doing a lot of pulling-based stuff as well, right? As we know, but you can't do any pulling exercises when you're on a mat.
That's right.
You need a pull-up bar. You need a pair of rings. You need to be able to row.
That's right.
Pull a kettlebell, barbell, whatever it is. So there's a real lack of pulling work. And I find that just in terms of developing the back, and the muscles of the back and your ability to pull is really integral to jiu-jitsu.
It is the most important.
Yeah, no jiu-jitsu players have a small back, right? We're known for big backs as part of grappling. And the other side of it that's just also the back, but a bit further down, is the glutes and the lower back.
Yes, sir.
And this comes from deadlifting and picking things up, and it comes from picking people up and stand-up grappling and takedowns. There's a distinct lack of development of the lower back and the glutes for me when I work with yoga practitioners.
Yes.
So it's like, man, if you do a bit of yoga, but hey, we throw some chin-ups in there and some ring rows and we get you deadlifting, all right, we've got a pretty good system
That's
now.
nice, yeah.
Yeah, but, you know, as a standalone thing, going to that class to fix your mobility and strength I don't find it a complete option either.
It's too much. I'm going to go a step ahead of that.
Go there.
It's inefficient, guys. Why the fuck are you going to spend 60 minutes to 90 minutes doing something when, if you know your problems, you can spend 15 to 20 minutes fixing that shit?
It's a really great point.
Don't do it. Like, I can't abide inefficiency, and also I really don't like doing things I don't need to do, especially someone who doesn't understand. It's like when you got a bad boss and they're trying to tell you how to do your job, and you're like, you don't even know how to do my job. How are you going to tell me? And that's the thing I find a little bit frustrating. So sure, there can be a great social experience with yoga, which is enjoyable, and you might have friends who do it, and that's cool. But really, if you understand, I've got a dicky left shoulder, my right ankle's a bit bunged from a footlock, and my hip flexors are tight, you should find the best tools for that job and do them. Have your own little routine. And just practice that and have your own practice. I mean, that's a great thing about yoga. It does try to teach people that discipline of having your own practice, which almost no one does, because you've got to show up to yoga with your branded mat and your associated apparel, kind of like jiu-jitsu.
Shout out Lulu.
Shout out Lululemon, my favorite. But that's the thing, guys. I think if we can take anything from it, it's like save yourself time. If you're trying to fit this in around a busy schedule, jiu-jitsu, the kids, all of that, take that hour for jiu-jitsu. But if your goal is to be more mobile, you can do that in less time and do it more efficiently.
Yeah. And I think that's really the key wrap up of this whole conversation is like, if you're looking for a solution, like a physical solution, then the solution may lie in those disciplines in part, but you got to just take the thing that you need and fuck off like the rest of it.
Yeah, Bruce Lee, right?
100%.
Accept what is useful, reject what is useless, and add what is entirely your own.
Exactly.
Yeah, very good.
You know, something further to yoga is the mindfulness aspect of it. And I do get that for a lot of folks, it's a very spiritual thing for them.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, totally. You know, it's like if you really, by going to a yoga class and that's kind of meditative for you and that's the only place where you get that, fucking, you know, power to you, you go there and get it.
Sure.
I guess a second caveat to this discussion of disciplines is, and this is something we recognize, if CrossFit or powerlifting or yoga or whatever discipline is the only way you're going to do some of that stuff, then do it.
Sure.
Right? Like if you absolutely won't lift weights unless you go to your CrossFit gym, then okay, fucking do it.
Yeah.
Or like if you are just not going to do any training unless it's at your powerlifting club and it's like chasing heavy 1RMs, it's like, man, go for it.
Yeah.
Because I would say, well, it's better to do some of it than to do none of it.
Yes.
You know, like it's better to do that discipline as well than to just do no lifting.
Yeah. Taking action to improve yourself for jiu-jitsu is the right idea.
Yes.
But what we are striving for is the optimum.
What's
best,
the ideal?
What is ideal?
And if you are, and that is, you know, and for those people who are like, well, yeah, I want the ideal. It's like, well, if you're trying to get more flexible, starting a new sport isn't the answer.
Right.
Right? Learning some shit about it. Great. Doing a few classes. Great. Pick up what's good. Learn some other shit. Do some gymnastics. Learn about their mobility. Learn some shit from us. Go to, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
Like research and then put that shit together and make your own practice.
Yeah, very good. Now, I think that's a good point to leave off because we have a question come through via the internet. And our good friend, now it didn't come through in full, but we did get enough information to be able to answer the question more or less.
Got the voicemail, guys.
We got the voicemail, so here we go. I'm going to hit the play.
Hi guys, love the podcast. My question for you both today is how do I increase mobility in my shoulder following an AC injury? It's more about maintenance.
Okay, so our friend has been cut off, but there's enough information there for us to break that down. Now, obviously, depending on the severity of the AC injury, like if you've, for example, had something fall on your shoulder and snap your AC. So AC is a small bone. Your acromion process sits off the edge of your shoulder, just over the edge. And if you have it inflamed, broken, anything, it is almost impossible to lift your arm up. Like it's so painful.
But an AC joint's common in jits. I've had a couple myself.
Yeah, to have it blow up, get irritated, get knocked. And the last little thing that we heard there was our friend had said it's a maintenance thing. So that makes me think, and wrongly or rightly, that it's not so bad, but needs to improve shoulder mobility. So what are we going to do if the AC joint is inflamed? What I would say, or my advice would be to our friend, don't do a lot of work overhead. Like spending a lot of time lifting your arm up is just going to cause the head of your humerus to jam up into the AC, which is probably going to make it feel worse. But there's a lot you can do below the shoulder to open up, to get the arms back, to get the shoulder back. What would be your two favorite things for opening up the shoulder below the shoulder, Joe?
I think working, so the pec.
Yep.
Which people don't think of the pec as the shoulder, but really the pec is the shoulder.
Yes.
So your chest muscle, so stretching that, so scorpion stretch or, you know, against the wall, whatever. And then I think this shoulder extension, so arms back. So, you know, lying down.
Shoulder stretch.
Seated shoulder stretch, you know, just sitting into that. You know, some German hang type stuff.
Yep.
I think anything along those lines would be the best place to start.
Yep, definitely.
You?
And yeah, I'm similar. The other thing I would say also is to just do a little bit of work through your thoracic, because if your shoulders are very forward and your thoracic spine is rounded, that pulls that, you know, your arm bones forward, gets you that hunch posture. But what that means is as soon as you go to lift your arm, you're likely to shrug, and that jams up through the AC. So anything you can do, so yeah, stretch your pecs, stretch it out through there. But if you can open up through your upper spine and just get that, the shoulders are going to sit in a healthier position, and that can help reduce inflammation depending on what's going on.
Yeah, I think anytime there's like, obviously for old mate, you want to go and speak to your physio and get a proper.
Now,
like,
I'm just going to get clear here, guys. we're gonna decode some Australian the vernacular here. When we say old mate, we just mean
he's British though.
But sure, mate.
How you doing, mate?
Yeah, you know what I mean, geez. No, what I was going to say here, guys, people are going to hate us. Essentially, when we say old mate, we're referring to a guy. It's like that guy.
Yeah, this guy. Yeah.
This guy.
Yeah.
You know, it's not having a dig at you saying you sound old or anything like that, if that makes sense. No, some people don't know this, man.
Really? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, like it's a very Aussie thing to say, oh, old mate.
Old mate.
We're talking about, that guy.
Yeah, but so in any case, this fella.
This guy.
The obviously you want to, the shoulder's a really complex joint.
It is.
And so you want to get the proper diagnosis from your physio about what you can and can't do. But the way that JT and I see it is, if you have what sounds like a chronic issue, and because you said maintenance, it makes us think this is an ongoing thing that you're dealing with. The best place to start is with the low-hanging fruit, which is asking, how is your mobility generally around the shoulder? The pec, the lats, shoulder extension, the delts. Do you have general, like a good level of general function of the shoulder? And most people don't. So if you've got something that's causing you issues, start with that general stuff, get the low-hanging fruit. For most folks, that takes care of the issue.
Yes.
And if it doesn't, then okay, you dig a bit deeper, find out like, all right, what's going on? But start with that. So yeah, the basics.
Nice. All right, my friends, thank you very much for tuning in. We appreciate all of your support worldwide. And if you have any questions, just like our friend today, please go to the website, bulletproofforbjj.com, click on podcast, you can scroll down, and you can leave us a message with a question. Or maybe you just want to put a topic of discussion out there. We're happy to address it and include it as part of the podcast.
Yeah, drop a voicemail and we'll feature you on the show.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Get famous.
Thanks, bro.
Thanks, Joe.
Cheers, guys.
See you.